Two quick things. I'm a bit embarrassed about the second thing. But first, whose style do you prefer? Jamie Raskin, straight to the point, no BS, always with a little bit of humour, or the soft-spoken FOS Katie BRitt? If you like me going for Raskin, press the like button now for Raskin. The other thing, just very quickly, a bit embarrassed to say, but if you get a second, press the thanks button and buy my team a coffee. $1.99. That's it. Thank you.
Ranking member for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to follow up on this because this exchange to me was extremely illuminating, because what we have here is the commissioner who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, and then we get a drive-by spray of propaganda, disinformation, and ideological attacks. So let me try to sort some of this out, and maybe we'll help to illuminate why we have a Food and Drug Administration rather than leaving it to politicians in state legislatures or in Congress to make decisions based on ideological whim. But let's start with ivermectin, which I believe is an animal deworming agent that some people were advocating for use to treat COVID-19. Has this been approved as a form of treatment or a cure for COVID-19?
No, it has not, if I may. I should also point out, it also has benefit for humans with worms, which is a huge problem in Asia. So it actually won a Nobel Prize because it's an amazing drug both for animals and humans who have worms. And there was a good reason to think it may work in the case of COVID, and that's why, thankfully, the community, including the NIH, did a number of randomized clinical trials. There's just no benefit, and you know, that's true of most things that we try. There's nothing wrong with thinking it might work. It just didn't.
Well, what about hydroxychloroquine, which was another thing that was advocated?
Basically the same story. There was really exciting preliminary work in the laboratory that said hydroxychloroquine may have activity against COVID, so the randomized trials were done. Unfortunately, no benefit. Again, nothing wrong with thinking it may work and trying it out in a randomized trial, but then we have the data now, so that leads you to the conclusion. So we have not been able to grant an indication for those.
I mean, I'm aware of a lot of political attacks and criticism against the FDA, but I can never figure out the coherence of it. Sometimes they seem to be saying, get out of the way and just let anybody advocate whatever they want and use whatever they want without any testing and without the various protocols you go through. And then other times they attack you because you don't have enough authority to do the things that we would want you to do in order to make kids' cinnamon applesauce clean, for example. So let's take that one, which has caught my eye since we certainly ate a lot of cinnamon applesauce in our house when our kids were little. Let's see. Your FDA-regulated products are manufactured or handled at something like 275 or 280,000 different registered facilities across the land. So what keeps you from inspecting every private manufacturing facility that produces things like cinnamon applesauce or peanut butter?
Well, if I may, I'll try to do this very quickly. I think the best way to think about FDA in general is that we're referees. You all in Congress actually write the rule book, much like in any sport. It's the leadership that writes the rule book. We enact what's in the rule book. And in the case of food establishments, like most sports, the first line of defense are the players in the game, which are is the industry that produces the products. And by and large, they do a great job, but sometimes they don't. And as referees, we have to be really wise about where we step in because we don't have an unlimited budget. So what keeps us from inspecting all 275,000? You don't have to be a brilliant mathematician to know how many people you'd have to have. But what we can do, for example, in food for children, is to have the manufacturers be required to do the testing, which is the way the drug system works. The manufacturers of drugs have to test every batch. And in the case of cinnamon and applesauce, if there had been mandatory testing, when it got imported into the U.S. from Ecuador, the stores that were selling it probably would have picked it up at that point.
And those kids ended up with lead poisoning, right?
Right. Lead poisoning is a very serious problem, as you know, and it causes chronic issues.
So you advocated mandatory testing. You would like us to give you that regulatory authority?
Yes.
And I do hope that's something that our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle would join us in. In the case of infant formula shortages, last Congress we passed a bipartisan bill to help address those shortages, but nearly 200 House Republicans voted against a second bill to give FDA resources to strengthen its oversight and inspection of facilities to prevent shortages like that from happening. So we can't have it both ways. If we want an effective, strong regulator, we've got to give them the authority and the resources to get the job done. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlemen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. When we look at the number of individuals that are detained by ICE, roughly on average, there's been about 39,000 detained this year. My question goes to the FY24 appropriations bill that was passed a few weeks ago and the funding level that was submitted there and passed for detention. Is that something that we need to continue, in your opinion, for FY25 to allow you to be able to detain the number of individuals you need to?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you very much. When you look at encounters, obviously coming across the border, we know there's been a lot of discussion about known gotaways and people that we've seen, but we don't know who they are, where they're going, or what their intentions are. The FBI director warned that he is increasingly concerned that terrorists may seek that opportunity to enter the U.S., and he's concerned about what that does in the interior of our homeland. And so I know that that's something that you probably pay close attention to as well. Is that something that you agree with? Just when we look at what's happening in the interior, it just increases threats across the homeland.
We are indeed very concerned about it. The safety and security of the American people is our highest priority. The bipartisan legislation would have provided us with additional staffing that would have strengthened the security of the southern border.
Yeah, and I am a big believer we've got to do our job right now. And so as I look at FY25, it is my goal to make sure that we get these dollars in the exact right place possible. I would love to see Congress start to do our job on time. I think that the American people deserve it, and I think every time we drag our feet, they're the ones that pay the price. You know, the last time that we actually passed all 12 bills on time was 1997. I think it's not only fiscally irresponsible, I think it's morally irresponsible. I think you need to know what your budget is, and I think when you look at something like a supplemental, you have to actually have base funding first. So my goal right now is to make sure that in FY25, we stretch every dollar, we put it where it matters, we put it where it can help you and help the courageous men and women that work in the Department of Homeland Security do their job. So I am laser focused on that. And in that, I really do appreciate the work that CBP and ICE have done in their seizures. I think they've grown when it comes to fentanyl and other illicit drugs. They continue to seize more and more, which obviously we know that means that's less that can get into our homeland. However, I know we can't simply seize our way out of it. And so would love to know from you, where would be best to direct dollars? You know, what are you doing to actually disrupt and dismantle that transnational criminal organizations and kind of the flow of that? And is there a place, maybe more HSI agents and others that would help disrupt that even more?
Ranking Member BRitt, more personnel
Okay.
is certainly one element of the answer. More HSI agents, more support personnel for the agents, more Customs and Border Protection officers and agents,
Okay.
more funding for technology. I am listing the different things that the bipartisan legislation would have delivered.
Okay. When we look at the Coast Guard, I strongly support the Coast Guard, and I'm proud that Mobile is the home of the Coast Guard Aviation Training Center, and I'm very proud of the offshore patrol cutter being built in Alabama. However, that's just one of the pieces of a very large Coast Guard shipbuilding strategy. I'm concerned with many other Coast Guard acquisition programs, which seem to be plagued with various issues. I am especially concerned about the status of the Waterways Commerce Cutter Program and the Polar Security Cutter Program, which have been faced with significant delays in recent years. I know that you've heard a number of my colleagues speak about this on both sides of the aisle. And I'm just taking a look at it. you look at the Waterways Commerce Cutter, which was intended by Congress to be a small business shipbuilding program. It's faced legal challenges and other significant contracting challenges in recent months. And as the daughter of two small business owners, I think it is important to me that our entire defense base, particularly as it pertains to shipbuilding, that they're giving consideration and given every fair opportunity to compete. And I think that that's what we need when we look at things that have just come down and the naval intelligence that was just declassified, looking at the shipbuilding of China, saying they can shipbuild 232 times faster than we can. I think that as many people as we have encouraging that, particularly from a small business perspective, I think that's better for America. So, Mr. Secretary, will you commit to engaging your Coast Guard leadership and looking into the current state of play when it comes to the Waterways Commerce Cutter program and what options should be considered, even if it means recompeting the program, to ensure the Coast Guard receives the shipbuilding assets they need in a timely manner and cost-effective schedule?
Ranking Member BRitt, I certainly will engage with the Coast Guard.
Thank you.
And look at this program and be in touch with you.
I really appreciate that. And one last thing, when we look at the alleged killer of Laken Riley, who entered the United States illegally in 2022 and then was released under DHS under a grant of parole, I'm sure your department has taken a look at that. And can you explain what specific either humanitarian reason or reason of significant public benefit, as you well know, one of those two things had to be used to authorize his release into the country. Can you explain that for this panel as well?
Ranking Member BRitt, there was no derogatory information of which we were aware in our holdings to compel the detention of this individual. It's a tragic circumstance. Our hearts break. I know all our hearts break for the family of Ms. Riley, and we expect that the individual will be prosecuted correctly to the fullest extent of the law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate that.